Hello, everybody. Today I want to talk to you about why the people who claim that we will run out of uranium are wrong. So often, when we get embroiled in discussions about nuclear energy, some of these people who think that they are smart will say, there's only like 6 million tons of uranium in the world, and if we keep using uranium at the rate that we're using it right now, then we will run out within 100 years. Basically, that's the most heard argument. Now, I've spoken about this a lot of times, but there's new news out, and this basically sheds some extra light on the matter. So, for instance, Morocco. If I would have told you that Morocco could become the world's largest producer of uranium, you would probably think I'm mad. Now, some of you are smarter than me, so you already know the answer to this. But for those who don't, bear with me. So, uranium is rarely found by itself. You have a couple of uranium mines in the world where they produce only uranium, where they basically dig up the ore. I believe that it used to be pitch blende, but there's also uraninite, and there's other kinds of minerals out there that you can basically cut out of the rock or dig up somehow. That's the way we used to dig up uranium for a long time. Right now, what we do is basically we leach it out of the ground. So you have these, basically you bore a long shaft down into the ground and you fill it up with a solvent which solves uranium, and then you suck it up in another pipe. That's basically how it is done these days. This process is called in situ leaching. Now, Morocco, they have an unconventional source of uranium. So unconventional sources of uranium is basically where you find one mineral or one material that you really want and you need for a specific purpose, like copper or perhaps gold, silver. I mean, I don't believe gold is silver, but in any case, there's lots of minerals out there that come together back together with uranium, also rare earth elements, for instance. Now, what if I told you that phosphate, which is one of the most mined substances in the world, is actually a very good source, unconventional source for uranium? Now, that's what is going on in Morocco. So Morocco has the biggest reserve of phosphate in the world. So they think that they have 50 billion tons of phosphates that they can mine. And the irony is that, the uranium content in these phosphates is somewhere between 50 parts per million and I believe 400 parts per million. So we're basically talking about 5 grams per ton or, half a kilogram per ton, which is really a lot. So Morocco. So let's take a look at the map. First I want to show you, they are going to invest 100 million in this uranium extraction project from phosphate, which is huge, which really tells you how serious these people are. Later I'm going to show you how much uranium there is in phosphate, which is really interesting. Morocco thinks that they can extract 6.9 million tons, which is 6.9 million tons, which is 1 million ton more than can be extracted from conventional sources right now. Granted, Olympic Dam is also counted towards those conventional sources, but to some people, Olympic Dam primarily is a copper mine. But there's a huge chunk of uranium that is basically right next to the copper or right beneath the copper. So it's also one of the biggest uranium mines in the world. So let's take a look. So I've upgraded this map. This is the same map that I used in the last video when I talked about the uranium fuel infrastructure, but I've added some interesting stuff, mainly phosphate mines. And I wanted to show you how these phosphate mines operate, basically. So this is Morocco over here, and this is the Western Sahara. I believe that their phosphate operations are also counted towards those that are, that are being done in Morocco. Maybe it's the same. Maybe it's the same company. I don't know. In any case, so let's take a look at the phosphate mines of Morocco. So I've used some colors. I'm sorry if you're colorblind and you can't see this because I don't know any other way of showing you this. So I've made these polygons, as you can see over here and over here, with this bluish green boundary and with these yellow boundaries. So the yellow boundaries, those are basically the factories and the places where they actually process the ore, right? So those are over here. So over here you get, for instance, this one is one of those places where they clean the phosphate, and over here, right, this is where they process the phosphate, right? I mean, there's and then over here, this what you see right here, these are basically tailings from when you try to get the phosphorus out of the phosphate, because what they basically do is they turn it into an acid. They turn it into phosphoric acid, and this phosphoric acid then gets transported towards the plant where they make the fertilizer, because that's what most of the phosphate is used for. Now, what I've also done is I've basically, so what they do is they move the phosphate or the phosphate rock or the sedimentary stuff that they excavate. They move that towards these facilities over conveyor belts, and that's those purple lines that you see. So I have basically highlighted all the purple lines, and I see now that I've even forgotten large pieces of former or current phosphate excavation sites. As you can see, there's no green bluish line surrounding this over here, but I'm human. I'm doing this with my own spare time. So, but what you can see over here is that these operations are huge. They are huge, and they're really denuding large tracts of land, as you can see. So this over here is 55.1 square kilometers long or big. This is a huge excavation, 55.1 square kilometers. And over here, 9.23 square kilometers. That's not even the largest out there, right? Over here, 65.2 square kilometers. And I mean, it's unmistakable what they're doing here, right? They're basically getting rid of the topsoil. And then once they get to the phosphor-rich layer, then they start basically, digging it up, and it's really interesting to see. As you can see here, here's another one of these places where they process the ore. As you can see, they have these huge conveyor belts everywhere, and that's basically how they feed this whole operation. I believe that the biggest operation is over here. As you can see, I mean, it's huge. 78.3 square kilometers, 140 square kilometers. Then over here, 17.1 square kilometers and 13.6 square kilometers. As you can see, these conveyor belts, for instance, right? 19.6 kilometers long. Over here, right? 8.46 and 10.6 kilometers long. I mean, these excavation activities are immense. So Morocco is one of the countries that has the largest phosphate reserves in the world, 50 billion tons. Now, they say that there's about 300 billion tons of phosphate reserves in the world. If you look at what is currently being excavated and what is currently active in this world, then Morocco is the biggest, bar none. Now, the weird part of this story is that China also produces phosphate, and they produce more phosphate than Morocco does, but they have less phosphate available to them. So over here again, 10.3 square kilometers, 8.3, and then over here 14.8 square kilometers, and then over here 12.4 square kilometers. Now, the interesting thing that I saw over here is that some of these phosphate factories are co-owned between China and Israel. Now, that's something I didn't expect, but it is what it is. Now, at first, because of this bluish tint that you see here, I thought that this would also be rich in copper, but I couldn't find anything to support that idea. So maybe it's a certain mineral that they're excavating here that makes the ore turn this kind of color. I could have bet that it would have been, related to copper, but it isn't. So that's something that was pretty weird to me. Now, there's also very rich copper ore in Tunisia over here. As you can see, the state of the... I haven't yet had the time to do everything here to basically show you all the mining stuff that is going on. But I'm going to keep working on this map, and, the access to the map is available to you in the description down below, so you can see how it works. But in any case, I mean, this is basically the same that you have seen in Morocco, just on a smaller scale. Over here, Jordan, the same thing, as you can see. They do it slightly differently over here. Well, it also looks pretty similar, but to some degree, they have these vehicle yards and such, I have no idea what they're doing there. I believe that these are excavators, right? Looks like excavators to me. And over here, bulldozers and such. This is all the vehicles that they need to excavate all that material. Now, I also wanted to show you something. Oh yeah, this is interesting. So the red one that I made over here, this is an actual fertilizer plant. Now, I was wondering, where does all the uranium stay when they're going to make this fertilizer? But it turns out that it simply stays with the phosphoric acid. So it eventually ends up in the fertilizer. So basically, fertilizer, I didn't know this, but has a very slight uranium content. So we're basically throwing uranium all over the place, it seems. Now, if I'm mistaken, please let me know. By the way, it seems that I've also missed another huge project over here. But it's, some of these are hard to see. I mean, just look at it. Yeah, they're definitely excavating stuff over here, and it's probably phosphate as well. You see over here, there's evidence, plenty of evidence of excavation work going on in this area as well. I have to check whether that is for phosphates as well. But it was also another one that I wanted to show you. Let's take a quick glance over at the United States. First, we go to Idaho. So in Idaho, they also excavate some phosphates, as you can see, right? So there's a huge facility over here that processes the phosphate rock, the phosphate ore, as well as here, what does it say? Barnwell Jimmy J. I have no idea what Barnwell Jimmy J is. But in any case, this over here, it is the, the Itafos Conda phosphate operation. So there you have it. Now you know that I'm not losing, not yanking your chain or anything. But as you can see over here again, it's quite small in scale compared to Morocco, right? So they have a couple of these mines where they're excavating phosphate. They're basically, I mean, I don't know if it's the top of the hill or if it's, it looks to me like it's like on the side, or maybe there's this mountaintop removal. I don't know. In any case, so here they are also mining phosphate. And there's more over here, as you can see. But then we go to Florida. And then you're going to see something you probably haven't seen before ever in your life. So there's a lot of sedimentary phosphate in Florida, right? And over here, Lake Parrish, for instance, is the result of a former phosphate mine, and they basically let it flood again and turn into a lake. So there used to be land back in the day. When they discovered the phosphate, they started excavating the phosphate, and then, it ended up becoming a lake. 17.3 square kilometers. But over here, look at this, right? All of this is phosphate activities. Now, there's also a solar plant, but it's built on the former phosphate mine. Basically, these are tailing ponds, I believe. Look like tailing ponds, but I don't know where the stuff comes from. There should be a factory here. Oh yes, over here. This is where the tailings used to come from. The Mosaic Four Corners field office, but there used to be a factory over here as well. You can see the scars on the earth, basically. Where all the phosphate was won. And I don't think that I've found every bit of land that they used for phosphate mining, but over here there's evidence of mining it as well. Over here. It's now a golf resort, as you can see, but all of this looks to me like it has been mined for phosphate. Then over here, huge, processing facility, right? This is where they get the phosphate. So that you can see that the scale of the phosphate mining industry is pretty big, pretty big, and if you have basically two kinds of phosphate reserves. You have igneous rock that contains phosphates, and you have sedimentary phosphate reserves. And those sedimentary phosphate reserves are the ones that are uranium rich. So these reserves over here in Florida are uranium rich. Then over here, Morocco, Western Sahara, Tunisia, and then here in Jordan. Those are the most phosphate-rich countries in the world, or basically the most uranium-rich phosphate reserves in the world. And then what I do, I go to the Minerals Yearbook on the USGS.gov website. This is basically where you can get most of your figures that you need to do all the calculations. This is the 2025 Phosphate Yearbook. I have to note that the data is in 1,000 metric tons, and then over here you can see, right? So this is Morocco, 50 billion tons, right? It's 50 million over here, but you have to add 3 zeros because it's 1,000 metric tons. And then they say over here, right? So the reserves at this moment are 74 million tons, 74 billion tons, which is really huge. And then finally, they say the world resources of phosphate rock are more than 300 billion tons, billion with a B. Now, for the purposes of figuring out whether we will ever run out of uranium, I've made a small Excel sheet. So first, you go to the World Nuclear Association. You basically check, what the annual production of uranium is, what the total reserve is. So it's 5.925 million tons world total, and this is at a uranium price of $130 per kilogram, right? So, and the interesting thing is, do I find that over here? Let's see. If you increase the money, over here it is, right? So the total recoverable identified resources to $260 per kilogram of uranium is 7.935 million tons of uranium, right? So if we would make uranium very expensive, $260 per kilogram, then we would have almost 8 million tons of uranium available to us. Now, let's look how the calculations pan out, right? So the world uranium at $130 per kilogram is 5.9 tons. World uranium at $260 is 7.9 tons. The Moroccan claim is that they can produce 6.9 tons from the 50 billion tons of phosphate that they have. Then if you take all the phosphate in the world, the 300 billion tons, right? And you then what I basically did, I said, ChatGPT, please let me know how much uranium is in this 300 billion tons, and please take into consideration only the phosphate reserves that are rich in uranium at least 50 parts per million. And then you come to a figure of 19.3 million tons, right? So So in all, if you take the 19.3 million tons and you take the 8 million tons together, I mean, you already come up to, nearly 27 million tons of uranium that we could mine from conventional sources and unconventional sources. But the ocean also contains a lot of uranium. Now, one of the problems with taking the ocean and uranium content in the ocean into account is that the ocean is a vast, vast volume, right? So this means that the amount of uranium is very dispersed. Now, I don't know if there are hot zones in the ocean where basically the uranium comes out of the earth thanks to plate tectonics. Maybe it would be more fortuitous to start there instead of just any spot in the ocean. But in any case, there's it's orders of magnitude more than there is that we can dig up, essentially. So if you take the annual uranium consumption at 400 gigawatts, right, I expect that to be about 80,000 tons a year. Now, we want to triple our nuclear capacity in the world, which means that we are going to grow to 1,200 gigawatts per year, which means that we need 240,000 tons if all of these reactors were uranium burners. Right, I personally think that we also should develop, commercially viable, quickly to deploy reactors that can also run on depleted uranium, which are basically breeder reactors. Oklo says that it is not a breeder reactor. They are building, a copy of the EBR2, or they are planning to build a copy of the EBR2, and they say we're only going to burn nuclear waste. And I think that it's only a matter of time before one of the Oklo reactors within the next 10 or 15 years is also going to be configured as a breeder reactor. I mean, it's basically in its DNA if you use the EBR2 as the blueprint. Now, if we know all of this, we can calculate how much uranium is left in the world, right? So at $130 per kilogram at the current rate of uranium consumption, there's 74 years. If we, start digging up uranium at $260 per kilogram, it turns into 100 years. If you take the Moroccan uranium into account, just the Moroccan uranium, so this is not stacking, right? It's not addition, then it's 86 years, right? And if we take all the uranium and all the phosphate that we can produce in the world, then we have enough for 241 years. And if we then basically, count all of these things together, so basically what you do is you take the 99 and you add the 241 to that, then you get 340 years. So for all intents and purposes, if we would triple, or if we would keep our nuclear fleet as it is now, it is 340 years. If we triple our nuclear fleet, we will run out in 100 years. But if you take the oceanic uranium into account and you do the tripling, I mean, we will basically never run out. 18.3 thousand years. That's simply something that we can't do. This is not taking into account any fast breeder reactors. This is not taking into account any other sources of uranium, for instance, mining tailings from coal-fired power plants and such. This is not taking into account maybe extraterrestrial mining, which is also going to be a possibility. So, for all intents and purposes, our uranium stocks are virtually inexhaustible. Yes, the stuff that we can mine is exhaustible. I don't believe that we will find boundless and endless amounts of uranium in spaces that we haven't looked yet. I mean, sure, we might double the years if we find a huge chunk of new phosphate somewhere that we haven't accounted for. But I think that we humans are incredibly industrious, and if we want to deplete a resource, I believe that we can. Some people think that I'm crazy when I say that. Well, That's up to them. In any case, we've been at this video now for 24 minutes. I really want to make them shorter because, more information in a shorter time span is better. Next week, I want to talk about new gigascale data centers that they're going to build. There's also some interesting news about the Linglong SMR, which is the first SMR that is going operational in China. Also very interesting news. So there's lots of stuff to talk about. In any case, if you want to support me, please go over to Patreon and pledge a little amount per video or per month, whatever suits you. It would help me buy Christmas gifts for my family, because this is basically the only extra source of income that I have outside of my disability benefits. In any case, thank you all for watching. May the strong force be with you. Bye-bye. Wow.